It started with traffic cameras, then came the barriers. In early 2023, residents of Oxford, England woke to find new metal gates cutting off certain streets, enforced by surveillance, timed permits, and hefty fines. The reason? Traffic reduction. But the reaction was anything but calm. Within days, streets once filled with quiet bike lanes were echoing with chants, sirens, and signs that read like dystopian warnings. Open-air prison. Climate lockdowns are coming. Wake up before it is too late. People were not just angry. They were terrified, not by the barriers themselves, but by what they believed they represented. Control, tracking, segregation of movement. And all of it, they said, was being disguised as something harmless, even helpful. They pointed to one phrase: 15-minute cities.
You've probably heard the buzzword 15-minute cities.
15-minute city.
Yeah.
Are 15-minute cities feasible?
What began as a well-meaning plan to make cities greener and more walkable had become the center of a global panic. So how did this idea get so twisted?
How so?
And what if the fears are not entirely wrong? To find out, we need to go back, not just to the first city that tried this, but to the man who started it all. Carlos Moreno is not a politician. He is not a bureaucrat. He is a scientist, a researcher born in Colombia, now based in Paris. In 2016, Moreno introduced the idea of the 15-minute city, a place where everything you need, groceries, school, doctors, parks, even work, is within a 15-minute walk or bike ride from home. No cars required, no long commutes. It was not about building new cities from scratch. It was about rearranging what already existed, taking underused office buildings and converting them into housing, turning wide roads into green spaces, zoning neighborhoods to be more self-sufficient. And people loved it at first. Paris adopted it. Melbourne jumped in, Bogota, Milan, Portland, all began experimenting with localized planning after the pandemic hit. It seemed like the future of sustainable urban life had arrived. But something was missing. Something no one saw coming. In late 2022, something shifted. Social media began exploding with videos, threads, and infographics warning that 15-minute cities were not what they seemed. Influencers warned that governments were quietly fencing us in, preparing to limit movement under the guise of reducing emissions. Some called them digital gulags. Others claimed they were the foundation of a new social credit system. The theory that by dividing cities into small zones and limiting car use, governments could gradually restrict when and where you go, all enforced by surveillance cameras and AI. In the UK, where cities like Oxford introduced low-traffic neighborhoods, protests turned chaotic. Fireworks were launched at government buildings. Public meetings were stormed. A simple map showing neighborhood zones became a symbol of global tyranny. The movement spread. People began to confuse 15-minute cities with other policies: carbon taxes, vaccine passports, digital IDs. And before long, it did not matter what the truth was. The narrative had gone viral. But to understand just how distorted the message had become, we have to look at the man caught in the middle of the storm. Carlos Moreno designed the 15-minute city to increase freedom, not restrict it. He never said people should be forced to stay in their neighborhoods. There was no talk of fences, no mention of tracking, no zones you could not leave. And yet, that is exactly what people accused him of. The backlash blindsided him. He received thousands of hate messages, accusations that he was part of a climate tyranny, that he wanted to lock down the world. One group even put his face on posters next to authoritarian leaders. Moreno went public with his frustration. "I just wanted to make cities better," he said. When did that become dangerous? But the damage was done. And while his intentions may have been good, even supporters began asking hard questions about the execution of the idea. On paper, the 15-minute city makes sense. But real cities are messy. In tightly packed European neighborhoods, sure, it works. But what about sprawling American suburbs? Or cities built entirely around car culture? Even more important, not everything can or should be local. Think about hospitals. You want a world-class trauma center nearby, but there is no way every neighborhood can have one. Or universities. There are thousands of primary schools in a city, but maybe a dozen colleges. You pick one for the program, not the distance. Jobs, too. If you are a software engineer or a cancer researcher or a film editor, you go where the work is, and that might be 30 minutes across town. Trying to force everything into a 15-minute box sounds nice, until you realize it could actually limit choice instead of expanding it. And that is where the idea starts to unravel. Here is the contradiction no one wants to talk about. Cities need to be both close and fast. Proximity is great, but not if it is the only thing you have. Because if the city does not let you get to where you need to be, quickly, then you are not free. You are stuck. Some transit systems have fallen for this trap. Cities like Toronto and Edmonton built new light rail lines that were slower than the bus routes they replaced, all in the name of local access. Montreal canceled a fast metro line in favor of a slower tram, because it looked better on paper. These decisions are not always about 15-minute cities, but they show a growing obsession with slowness and localism, even when what people actually need is speed and reach. And if that mindset takes over planning departments, then yes, cities could become cages. Not through force, but through slow suffocation. So, is the 15-minute city a conspiracy? Not exactly. But here is the twist. The people who fear it might not be entirely wrong. The concept itself isn't dangerous. But when governments implement sweeping change without transparency, without clear communication, and without respecting the public's freedom to move and choose, fear fills the gap. Add that to post-pandemic trauma, rising surveillance, and deepening public mistrust, and any new policy can look like a threat. That is why the real danger isn't the city plan. It is how it is rolled out. If cities focus only on theory, not reality, they risk creating the exact dystopia they claim to prevent. The 15-minute city began as a dream. Less traffic, cleaner air, stronger communities. It became a battleground of ideas, a vision of utopia for some, and a tool of control for others. Carlos Moreno is still out there, still defending his idea, still urging planners to build smarter cities. And cities are still listening. But maybe the lesson isn't about city design at all. It is about communication, about trust, about balancing efficiency with freedom. Because if we are not careful, even the most well-meaning ideas can become something very different, once fear enters the picture. And in a world that is changing fast, one question still hangs in the air. Are we building the future, or just designing a better disguise?